Now, horror games are great and all, but the problem is you expect them. Any scares you get from a horror game tend to have a lesser impact because, well, it's a horror game. Of course you're gonna see blood. Of course there's gonna be a scary monster. Of course there's gonna be some horrifyingly dark twist that everything was actually super evil the whole time. But horror does much better when you are expecting it. If you see blood in a horror game, you're not gonna bat an eye. But find blood in a kid's game, you're gonna feel the impact, mostly because it goes against your direct expectations, breaking the contract between the creator and the audience and making you pause for a moment because that wasn't supposed to happen. And so that's what we're here for today, going over a multitude of games not in the horror genre that have creepy moments you weren't expecting. From the infamous to the unheard of, let's go over the top 8 most disturbing moments found in non-horror games. Number 8. The True Lab from Undertale. Look, if I'm going to talk about disturbing things in non-horror games, of course I'm going to talk about the True Lab. So let's get out of the way right from the get-go. For those of you who don't know, firstly, who are you? And secondly, Undertale is an immensely popular RPG from 2015 inspired by the Earthbound series. Most well known for its spare mechanic where you're encouraged to not battle anyone. With this comes the pacifist and genocide routes. The genocide route is notoriously creepy, but arguably worse, surprisingly, is near the end of the pacifist route. In order to get the pacifist route, you not only have to spare every monster you encounter, but you also have to go through multiple date events to properly befriend some of the other characters. After befriending Papyrus, Undyne, and Alphys and having completed at least one neutral route, the next time you go to Alphys' lab, you'll notice a note on the floor and the usually inaccessible elevator open. The note goes on about how Alphys wants to become a better person and fix her mistakes, mentioning multiple times that these aren't mistakes that can just be fixed by friendship, but that she has to do. Ominously, it ends with, "If you don't ever hear from me again, if you want to know the truth, enter the door to the north of this note. You all at least deserve to know what I did. If we do so, we quickly come to regret it, as the elevator loses power on the way down and you drop into the True Lab." In complete juxtaposition to the rather cheery game we had before, with goofy killer game show robots and anime-loving fish, we're now in this bleak laboratory faced with a constant sense of unease trying to turn the power back on. Everything about this place goes against your expectations. You more often than not will have encounters just by interacting with the environment the way you normally would up until this point, which gives a sense of unease as anything and everything you come to expect gets turned on its head. Even the encounter symbol turns against you, and even worse, you must fight the amalgamates, painful melted creatures reflecting past monsters we fought, and as we learn from the entries, are people, or technically monsters, who were on the edge of death and using the experiments by Alphys, which went horribly wrong. Although the normal amalgamate track isn't too spooky, Endogene's soundtrack is this distorted, wheezy breathing which gets faster and faster as it undulates from getting pets and playing. And that's not even scratching the surface. Easily the most disturbing of these amalgamates is Snowdrake's mother, who just from the sprite alone looks just so depressing. Falling apart, their dialogue seems to show they have a hard time speaking, and of course, the music. The music shifts and distorts in this melancholic way that just makes you feel so bad. And even when you get the power back on and find Alphys, where she finally reunites them with their families, it's bittersweet. As although the families are all happy and everything, there's still these amalgams. And with what we know about determination and amalgamates, they're never going to be able to die, even after their families do. And chances are there is no fix for this. They'll just be stuck like this forever. Either way, the True Lab is easily one of the most disturbing locations in Undertale, and as such, earns its spot on this list. Number 7. The bad ending from Wandersong. Now, Wandersong's a pretty great underrated gem, and as I'm sure you can tell from the visuals, the game is an overall peppy, cute game with a rather optimistic theme. Basically, you play as a bard, who I always name Kiev, and after getting a prophetic dream about the end of the world, you go out to find pieces of the Earth Song to prolong the universe's existence. Along the way, with the help of a cynical witch, Miriam, you help out each town from their plights and get friends, all while journeying to the spirit realm of each world to collect each piece of the song. At the very end of the game, the world begins to deteriorate as the end times come into fruition. However, just as all seems hopeless, each of the cities of people that you helped sing out in harmony, convincing the world's god, Eva, to let the world live on. However, with such a niche game, you're bound to get a niche community. And with a niche community, you get speedrunners. Not long after the game's release, speedrunners began dissecting the game as thoroughly as they could to find ways to complete the game as fast as possible. Eventually, a speedrunner from the community discovered that you can play the Overseer songs used to access the spirit world early, so long as you knew the exact notes to play it and went to its designated location. This meant skipping over a wide majority majority of the game, as the spirit world is where you get each piece of the Earth Song, which naturally led to a massive race to get a full run using this skip. However, it was quickly discovered that this skip wasn't some unintended artifact of the game, as once you reach the end of the game like normal, nobody sings, because you never met them. The game simply fades to white, cuts to black, and then the credits roll. The world is over. No sounds, no color, nothing. And it really does make sense too, as skipping out and helping everyone completely goes against the game's core theme. So I really like that they specifically programmed it in that if you don't help people along the way, that your whole quest was for nothing. It really solidifies the message in my eyes, even if the majority of people aren't going to see it. I'd pay good money to see what the first speedrunner's face looked like when they accidentally discovered this ending. Number 6. Queen Vanessa's manor from A Hat in Time. A Hat in Time for the longest time was a massive hyperfixation of mine. Inspired by collectathon games from ye olden times, A Hat in Time is a fantastic game where you must collect timepieces after they fell from your ship, preventing you from going home. Playing as Hat Kid, you delve through various worlds, helping various people and discovering several acts to explore. Overall, the game is pretty silly and cheery, however the most notable exception of this is Subcon Forest, where you're forced into servitude by the Snatcher who steals your soul and forces you into various tasks for him. Though even then, there's a very comedic tone to it, like scooting around to deliver ghost mail or killing a deadly toilet. However, amongst these is an act nothing like the rest, dubbed Queen Vanessa's Manor. Why are all Vanessas evil in horror settings? I swear, I've not seen a good guy Vanessa from any horror game. The level starts out normal enough, however, you'll quickly find things are not as they seem. After breaking in through the cellar, you're told you can't use any of your hat abilities, because of clause in your contract or something. That means no sprinting, no ground pounds, no stopping time, none of that. For the first time in the game, you're abilityless. Vulnerable. Not a good start. Making our way inside, we find ourselves thrown into a chase sequence with this hunched over shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. This is Vanessa, and the only way to get her to stop chasing you is hiding under these predetermined hiding spots scattered throughout the map. It's pretty easy to see that you need to collect these keys to properly traverse the manor, but unfortunately for you, doing almost anything in this manor makes enough noise to alert her to your location. And anytime she's near you, the screen gets dark and shaky, and plays this shrill horror noise that definitely does not help the atmosphere. And it also doesn't help that nearly everywhere you go, you can see the victims of this house, frozen forever as these living sculptures. Eventually you'll make it through, find your timepiece, and skedaddle out of there, but that's not the end for this. You see, another thing you'll be collecting are these time riffs scattered throughout levels you've already completed to encourage you to explore acts you've already gotten timepieces in. Each main area has one, and amongst these is one for Subcon Forest called Sleepy Subcon. On top of these being remixed levels, they also have these picture collectibles that will give you some insight into the backstory of some of the characters, and Subcon's is no different, titled The Tale of Queen Vanessa. In this, we are shown that she was in love with the prince and was overall a kind individual. However, when they saw the prince with someone else, she mistook this for cheating and wound up completely heartbroken. Unfortunately for her, the prince was simply just buying her flowers from a florist. But when the prince arrived, Vanessa wouldn't hear any of it and had them taken away to be locked in the dungeon until their eventual death, with her transforming into the monster she is today and the prince becoming who we now know as the Snatcher. It's a shame what happened, but I don't think I'll ever forgive them for this level, man. I hated this level. But even so, it's always fun when games like this have an unexpected horror level like this, and it's even more fun to watch other people play. Number 5. Mimi from Super Paper Mario. Super Paper Mario is a pretty interesting Paper Mario game. Unlike the other entries, which are RPG games, Super Paper Mario is a lot more platform. In the game, you must stop Count Bleck from using the Chaos Heart to cause doomsday by collecting the pure hearts and defeating him. Sometime during the second chapter, you're trying to find Merly, and find yourself at Merly's mansion, naturally. However, we instead find a maid named Mimi, who seems less than innocent as we're led into multiple traps, and after accidentally breaking an inconspicuous face, are saddled with 1,000,000 rupees of debt, and forced to work tirelessly to pay it off alongside dozens of other enslaved workers who help us get various codes throughout the compound, allowing us to steal her stash, to which Mimi is enraged that we were able to successfully pay it off. Heading to the basement, we encounter Merly, who tries to suspiciously get us back into debt, to which we find that she's not the real Merly, but Mimi again, as she's a master shapeshifter of Count Bleck's crew. After sussing her out, she goes on the attack, but she's not just gonna fight us as some maid girl, no. She twists her head off, her eyes dilate like a predator, and she unravels her face into a massive spider legs. Chasing around the level, her mouth writhes in this uncanny, unnatural way that just makes me feel weird. And when you manage to defeat her, she writhes before disappearing. Oh, and she comes back, and each time they make sure to use that exact same creepy head twisting animation. Honestly, I imagine if you had arachnophobia, it's a lot worse, but man, did it freak me out when I first saw it. Number 4. Getting Hanged from the Hayseed Knight. Yup, but you never heard of this one. If you thought Wandersong was obscure, here's something even more unheard of. Hayseed Knight is a visual novel game where you play as the one-eyed farmer Adder, who dreams of becoming a knight and soon finds himself becoming enwrapped in conflict as he learns he's a gaze reader and must... Well, if I'm being completely honest, I haven't actually completed the full game yet. However, that doesn't stop the game from having a surprisingly dark moment midway through the story. You'll meet characters such as Anna, Adder's childhood best friend and boss, Ilograb the guardsman and your father figure, Gyoff the terrible bard, and Sepp, who does not know the meaning of consent! But at some point during chapter 2, you'll find yourself at the only tavern Gyoff has not been kicked out of. After a fight between Adder and Gyoff, and a scene where Adder and Ina are having a heart-to-heart, a character named Burbiz comes to the table mistaking Ina for a golem. Basically, these porcelain servants from the Sephi, it's a lot of world-building stuff, but the important part is he's being an absolute prick because Ina is albino and mute, begging with Adder to buy her from him, and refusing to hear him out whenever Adder explains that she is not, in fact, a golem. This comes to a climax when Burbiz cuts a small gap into her trouser leg, and upon not finding its quote-unquote joints, let's say they looked a little further than they should have.
Oh, that is very anatomically correct.
So Adder naturally beats the hell out of him, but turns out the guy Adder just punched wasn't just any old person, but a noble. Meaning despite Burbiz's sexual harassment, Adder gets sent to jail and Ilograb scolds him. Later though, Ilograb returns to Adder and it turns out they're going to be, taking a small stroll through the marketplace. By this, he means taking Adder to get publicly hanged. Quite the change from what was, up until now, medieval romantic hijinks with some mild political class conflicts. On top of that, it's revealed that this isn't even the first time, as he's been sentenced to hang several times, unsuccessfully each time as his neck shape makes him rather hard to choke. But even so, there's this pretty brutal image of him as the trapdoor from under them falls and they are executed, which just gives me chills I can't explain. I know it's not that graphic, but it's just so uncomfortable to look at, just like a real public hanging, I imagine. Luckily the hanging fails, but rather than freeing him, the guards try again, having finally found a noose that should fit around their neck. Oh yeah, and reminder, this happy-go-lucky green guard guy here is his father. So the fact that Ilograb is acting so cheery and is gladly getting a fourth noose to hang his supposed son just adds to the unsettling nature of it in my eyes. If this makes you curious about the game though, you can find it on Steam and Itch. It's pretty underrated, so go pick up a copy if anything I said here interests you. Not sponsored, it just deserves some love. Number 3. Sai's parents were poisoned to death from Pets Dogs 2. If you watched my channel before, you'll know exactly what I'm about to talk about. Just to get out of the way though, Pets Dogs 2 is a game from Japan made by the makers of Dog Island that was localized into a Pets game, despite being nothing like other Pets games in the franchise. Whereas most Pets games have you adopting and caring for a dog, Pets Dogs 2 is an adventure game where you must stop the end of the world by finding Theophilus the wizard and tracking down 3 crystals to put an end to the evil wolf that your friend pressured you into giving a powerful magical hat. As much as I love the game, in part from my own nostalgia playing as a kid, a good bulk of the gameplay is talk to this NPC, go find the item they want, come back, congrats, you can proceed. But that doesn't stop the game from having multiple uncharacteristically dark moments, which is exactly why I made a full video on this weird game. I'll have it linked down below if you're interested. Back to the game itself though, the game has its fair share of weird, creepy dialogue. Although a lot of it can just be passed off as other things, for example the quest where you have to skin a friendly Komodo dragon to make it to a fireman suit, you could pass that off as the devs trying to give the game variety by making you get the item from an enemy rather than the sniffing mechanic the game oh so loves to use. Which, I can see that. But what I can't see is why Sai is given such a dark backstory. For context, Sai acts as a main character due to being required to get several items from them, like the ability to call animals, the lighthouse fuel. We don't talk about the lighthouse fuel. They've seeped into my dream. It starts with Sheila the tailor wanting us to get the legendary pattern. Apparently it was created by a genius designer named Townsend, however he and his wife both died, meaning we need to go find his younger son Sai to get the pattern instead. Now, a character being an orphan isn't creepy on its own, but what is creepy is basically everything around it. As you do quests for him, he's almost constantly lamenting his father's death and grieving over what happened. According to the townspeople, when both of Sai's parents died, he fled the town in grief and nobody really went to check in on him, just letting him fend for himself up until the tailor decides she wants something out of them. And it's not like he's been left alone for just a few days to grieve or anything like that. One of the characters explicitly says, "It's been so long I almost didn't recognize him." And to top it off, every quest you have to do for him involves you getting him food, which could in itself imply that he's not surviving very well. But that doesn't stop the village from pretending he doesn't exist and not checking on him at all as he fends for himself. So yeah, great job, Pawville. Definitely makes me want to save you from total destruction. Seriously though, unless this is something that the localization team just decided to randomly throw in, there's nothing you can really say as an excuse to uncreepify this for me. Especially with Sai's unending sorrow for his father's passing being his main character trait in all of his dialogue. Number 2. The Desert of the Kanaran from Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc. Rayman 3 is an interesting game to say the least. I mean, I played Rayman Legends to 100% completion with my sister when I was younger, so I know how weird the Rayman series can be. But Rayman 3 follows Rayman as he journeys to get the game's main villain Andre out of Glowbox when Glowbox accidentally swallows him alive. Seeking out the teensy Dr. Autopsy, they're unable to extract the dark lump from Glowbox, and so they must seek out Romeopathy and later Artritis, whose office is in the Desert of the Kanaran. Although this is a token spooky level, it's not set in a haunted house or graveyard or anything like that. Instead, it is set in the burning sands of the desert, whereas we hop across bones and skulls and make our way into an eerie cave-like labyrinth. You'll eventually find some teensies who will warn you of these creatures called the Kanaran that are completely invincible and warn us not to get anywhere near them because the moment they get their claws on you, you're dead. To which you immediately thereafter fall into a pit into the tunnels which swarm with Kanaran, and that's on top of these creepy bony ghost-like enemies chasing you around. Eventually, Glowbox gets themselves captured and you're forced to lure the Kanaran into specific spots to solve puzzles and get your friend back. All the while, they have these lines of dialogue like, tear off his flesh, skin him, stick bamboo under his nails, or worst of all,
make him write bad checks.
no, please, anything but that. I have a family! You're eventually led down a path where you are ambushed by the Kanaran. However, turning back, there are even more Kanaran, leaving you cornered up until the last second where the ground gives way. This leads you to coming face to face with the Kanaran champion who takes great pleasure in the idea of tearing our brain apart and how they plan to burn your corpse.
I'm sure your friend will shine in the arena when Reflex is burning his corpse!
Eventually, though, you successfully defeat the champion, save your friend, and go on your merry way. However, that doesn't change how straight up eerie these quotes are for a kid's game, and how downright disturbing this whole area is. And lastly, for our number one pick, the Malware DRM from Sonic Gather Battle. Now, first things first, I should specify that this isn't an official Sega game. But that being said, this isn't supposed to be a horror game. In fact, as far as I'm aware, this thing has no references to Sonic.exe. However, even so, it manages to unintentionally be a real-life creepypasta. You see, this game was made during the Don't Steal My Sonic OC era. So naturally, the creator of Sonic Gather Battle decided they want to protect their original, totally not recolored sprites. But how does one protect game sprites? After all, people could just rip the sprites from the game itself with the use of the proper hacking tools. And on top of that, how do you ensure everyone playing your game is playing fair and square, and isn't cheating their single-player copy of a fan game? Well, that answer came in an update adding a specialty DRM to the game. With this DRM, if you try to type anything like Sonic Gather Battle hack, cheat, or even mod into your browser, it will automatically close the page, and booting up Cheat Engine will enable the second stage of its malware. If you try to boot the game up, the title screen will become completely gray with no characters on it, and upon starting up a match, the game will be completely red as eyes appear throughout the stage and creepy music plays. And if you try to alter the game's code in any way, the stage's background will turn black and blue, just like you are about to be, as unkillable ghosts spawn to the level to absolutely destroy you, rendering the game completely unplayable. But that's not all, as if the DRM activates in any way, the game will locate your IP address and send it to the creator's online database, so it can reinstall itself onto your computer should you delete it. On top of that, the game allegedly keylogs your computer to find things like passwords and credit card information as well. The only way to be removed from the database was to contact the creator of the fan game and convince him to whitelist your computer and remove your data. After several more updates, including one to bypass virtual machines, they've seemingly disappeared from the internet, from what I could tell. Whether this is because he got arrested or not, I couldn't definitively find out. However, one thing's for certain, don't get this game. Now, I'm not even sure if you can get a copy of this game anymore, but under no circumstance should you download it, as it can apparently bypass virtual machines and is near impossible to get rid of once on your device, should you intentionally or unintentionally trip its nearly 10-year-old DRM. As such, for a non-horror game, I believe this is the most disturbing moment I can offer you. So what were your thoughts? Were there any disturbing moments from non-horror games I should have included? Let me know in the comments below. This was Spice from CutCafe, and I'm hoping to have the next video finally be that Cloud Scratchers video essay, so stay tuned for that. Otherwise, I'll see you around. Peace!